Hey viewers, my name's Kara. I'm your host for Tuesdays on the Pagan Perspective, and this week we're talking about the concept of an uneven or unequal yoke in relationships, or more specifically, marriage. So what is an uneven yoke, and what does it mean to be unequally yoked? I already know that this refers to an unequal partnership. When two oxen are yoked together to do a job, if they are unequally yoked, then this means that one of them is doing more work than the other, and the job isn't done as well. It's not a fair and equal partnership, and due to the yoke that they're wearing being uneven, they can actually end up being hurt by trying to work this way. So I understand the metaphor, but what does it mean in terms of the Bible? I didn't really know for sure, so I did some research. I Googled it. The first site I found from the expository files basically says that it's not the relationship, friendship, or partnership itself that is forbidden, but rather it is forbidden for the believer in the situation to join the non-believer in their non-belief. Quote, "This prescribes not the friendship or acquaintance itself, nor believer with unbeliever joining together in things innocent. This forbids the Christian from participating with the unbeliever in idolatry." End quote. It then talks about how Jesus himself associated with sinners, even ate meals with them, and that is fine. It is only considered wrong by this biblical passage to join in on the sin, as it were. It also mentions where Paul says that a marriage between a believer and a non-believer need not be dissolved if the non-believer consents to live with the believer. And since Paul would never tell someone to stay in a relationship that was wrong, the relationship itself must not be wrong. I think that article explained it quite well for me, but since there are always other views, I went on. The second article, from Got Questions, talks more about how oxen who are unequally yoked simply cannot do the task ahead of them, and goes on about how believers and non-believers are essentially opposites and simply have nothing in common. This article says that unbelievers have opposite worldviews and morals, and for the relationship to work, one or the other must abandon his moral center. Let me stop right there. I don't think that's true. That pagans and other non-believers, which is a silly term because many people who are called non-believers do believe in something, just not the same thing, lack morals or have necessarily completely opposite morals is not true, or at least this varies by individual. A lot of people still think that non-Christians are simply immoral or amoral, and, well, not true. The article closes with a mention of marriage and says that marrying a believer with a non-believer is essentially uniting opposites, which makes for a very difficult marriage relationship. Now, certainly there are some things about life and marriage for which having conflicting views would be difficult, but I don't think they're leaving room for when opposites attract. The third article, from Bible Truths, provides what they say is the exact list Paul gave the people of Corinth, telling them what to avoid. Unbelievers, unrighteousness, darkness, Belial, which is an epithet of Satan, and I apologize if I mispronounced it, infidels, and idols. Overall, I'd say referring to someone who isn't a Christian as being essentially any of those things is pretty rude, to say the least. And I think if you ask a lot of pagans about darkness and idols, they'd have some interesting things to say. Then the article talks about carnality and other things, but it does add the point that the verse is really a warning against being unequally yoked at all, perhaps especially with non-believers. But it allows that it's possible for two believers to also be unequally yoked. So what it comes down to is that a partnership should be just that, a partnership. You never want to be in a partnership where your partner isn't sharing the burden. Like the oxen, you want to work closely with someone who is equally matched to you. This could be in business, in friendship, or in marriage. Finally, I found a blog post written by someone who entered a marriage when both partners were believers. And during the marriage, the author of the post deconverted, as they put it. That's a unique perspective in itself. When a change occurs within a relationship, I do think it's often harder to come to terms with because it's changing the relationship that you entered into. If you are entering into a relationship or a marriage knowing that the people involved think differently, you have an advantage there because you won't be surprised later on. Or maybe you will, but it won't be because of this. My point is that you already know you don't share the same religious beliefs. And if you're going into it knowing that, you have more time to figure it out and decide what's best for you than a couple who is already married and then has some major discrepancy arise. I really like the point the author of this blog makes about both partners needing to support one another, but also not trying to change one another, and making sure that as you respect your partner, you demand the same respect from them. It's a partnership for a reason. Relationships in general require good communication, and sometimes compromise. Even though this Bible verse would argue that compromise is part of the curse of an unequal yoke, I disagree. Mutual respect and understanding is good for your relationship at large. Not only in regards to your religions, but certainly including that. For my part, I've mentioned in the past in my video about dating as a pagan that I once dated a Christian, and by Christian, I mean a guy who was raised Christian, but wasn't active in his faith at all. But when he started thinking that maybe he wanted to become active in his faith, he told me that he'd have to dump me, because a Christian can't date a pagan. I had to remind him that I was still the same person, and he already knew that I was pagan from the get-go. We didn't break up right then because he realized that I was right. But we did break up later, because we were just wrong for each other. I also dated a pagan in the past, and that relationship ended because we were wrong for each other. So having very similar faiths isn't all there is either. It's about the people, the individuals. If you're in love, for real, I dare say you can figure it out. And if not, well, I know I wouldn't be able to stand being in a relationship with someone who thought I was evil or wrong or anything of that sort. But that's just me. I wouldn't feel equally yoked, if you will. So right now I'm dating an atheist. That wasn't planned. We started a relationship and he happens to be an atheist. It works pretty well because I do my thing and he does his. He's very accepting, knows his comfort level and boundaries as far as what kind of events he will attend with me and which he would prefer not to. And as long as I'm not trying to force him to believe anything, we're good on that front. So talk to your partner. Be honest about when you're feeling disrespected, but treat each other with the respect and love and understanding due to a person who you're in love with. If it can't work, it can't work. But if you really want it to, you have to be honest about making it work. I'm not a marriage counselor. I'm not any kind of counselor. But that's my humble opinion. Thank you for watching. I'll see you next week. Until then, don't forget to be awesome, blessed be, and goodbye.